Thank you, Michelle. We are living in strange times. We are living in what might even be described as perilous times. And that being said, it leads me today to do something I have never done in 24 years of pastoring, and that is to speak directly about any politician. On the political left, we have President Biden, and I will not delve into great specifics, but in ways unlike no previous administration ever has, he has advanced LGBTQ plus policies and ideologies in ways no other administration ever has, and has demonized those that disagree in ways like no other administration ever has. With respect to gender issues, he names a man who says he is a woman named Rachel Levine as the Assistant Secretary for Health and Human Services, who even argues that gender-affirming surgery should be conducted on children. With respect to abortion, he could not be more adamantly pro-abortion, arguing ultimately that there shouldn't be any restrictions on abortion, even having his vice president do what no other sitting vice president or president has ever done: go to a Planned Parenthood which has butchered more people, killed more human beings than the Nazis ever dreamed of, and celebrated their work and applauded their cause. Just less than 10 days ago, in his own words, he called justices who voted to overturn Roe versus Wade stupid. I speak of these issues because each of these issues, while having political ramification, have moral and theological roots. They are rooted ultimately in what the Bible does or does not say. But that's on the political left. On the political right, we have President Trump. While in office, his administration was deemed to be a great obstacle to the LGBTQ movement. His administration appointed justices that, from the perspective of the theological right, affirmed, and in ways that many of us would appreciate, affirmed religious rights, and ruled that there was and is in fact no such thing as an unwritten right to abortion within what had been previously described as the penumbra of the Constitution. All of these things we may celebrate. Nevertheless, Donald Trump says that he is a man who is a Christian. He has even recently joined in hawking a God Bless the USA Bible in concert with Lee Greenwood that has an impression of the American flag on the front, the King James Bible in the middle, founding documents of the United States in the back, and a handwritten copy of the lyrics to God Bless the USA that can be all yours for $59.95. Yet, when pressed in an interview, could not name a single verse of Scripture that he found meaningful. Not one. You see him standing proudly in front of a church holding a Bible upside down, and when standing at a commencement address at Liberty University, so knows his Bible that he referred to it as 2 Corinthians. Regardless of what you think about what happened in a New York State courtroom this past week, with respect to 34 indictments for which he was convicted of this past week, and I'm not going there at all this morning except to say that happened. Well, I will say this. What is without dispute is this: if Donald J. Trump did not have illicit, adulterous affairs, again, this is a man on his 3rd wife with prostitutes, strippers, and porn stars, there would be no charges. Those of us who were on the theological right back in the 90s when Bill Clinton was having his illicit affairs, when he was paying out his hush money, what were we saying? Character matters. We're in a heap of trouble. What in the world are we going to do? And these are not just questions that we think through as Americans, but you're here today as someone who not only has the capacity to vote, but you're someone that has the capacity to vote, hopefully, impressed by and guided by biblical truth. And you're someone, hopefully, that has a personal relationship with Christ. And maybe you're thinking, Michael, I'm kind of surprised. And honestly, I have been very explicit in all of my years of pastoring. I have never done anything that I just did, which is to go specifically after any politician. You'd say, well, Michael, why in the world would you do that? Well, because every single one of us, if we're honest, we are thinking through these issues, because all of those are not political posturings. Those are all facts. Every one of those is a fact. And every one of us is having to think through those things, not just as a person, not just as a man or a woman, not just as a family, but you're here today thinking through them. If you're watching, you're thinking through them as a follower of Jesus. And maybe it is that you're wrestling with this question because it does create real struggle. How do I live here following Him? How do I live here following Him? Now, increasingly, this is becoming a challenge for us to navigate these questions, and we're going to be thinking about that in the coming weeks. And this is not some political spiel. You're not going to be getting Jerry Falwell sermons rehashed from the 80s. I promise that's not the case. But what we are going to be thinking about is how it is that we live here following Him, because these are not new questions. And they're not new questions because Jesus addressed them going all the way back when He shared what we know as the Sermon on the Mount. Because He was sharing with His people then what He still wants us to know today, because in that He was sharing, this is how you follow me here. And it's not always going to be easy. Now, in the coming weeks, that's where we're going to be. But it's going to take us a week to get there, because we're going to start in 1 Peter today as we think through this question very simply. How do I live here and follow Jesus? How do I live here and follow Jesus? Look with me in 1 Peter chapter 2, starting with verse 11. There we read this: Dear friends, I urge you as strangers and exiles to abstain from sinful desires that wage war against the soul. Conduct yourselves honorably among the Gentiles, so that when they slander you as evildoers, they will observe your good works and will glorify God on the day He visits. A couple of things, I think, based on what God used Peter to say here, didn't just have application then, they help us think through the answer to that question today. How do I follow Him and still live here? And when I'm thinking through all this mess and muck that's going on today, how do I do this as a follower of Jesus? I think I need to do two things. The first is this: live here knowing you don't belong here. Live here knowing you don't belong here. Now, God used Peter to write this letter to a group of people for whom following Jesus was becoming increasingly difficult. And bear in mind what's going on. This is occurring in the first century, and the later it gets in the first century, the temperature in terms of hostility against first century believers is going through the roof. And the persecution, certainly by the Jews, that was already intense, but the persecution by the Roman government was really, really, really ramping up. And it was not just possible, it was certain that those who were reading these words that God was using Peter to write were going to be, many of them, facing questions like, am I going to be arrested? Am I going to lose my freedom? Am I going to be beaten? Am I going to be executed? What happens if the Romans find us worshiping? They are thinking through all of these things. And so they're trying to think about, all right, as a follower of Jesus, how do I live here? I'm dealing with a government that doesn't like me. I'm dealing with a government that doesn't look like me. I'm dealing with a government that doesn't share my values. Well, that sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? But except it was much worse. But we can still pay attention to that. And so based on this, Peter says to them, listen, I urge you. So it's not like, I'd have you think about this. He's saying, I urge you. There's a pleading sense. There is a sense of a real impetus, a strong encouragement. I want you to do something. And then he says, as strangers and exiles. Now, there's a great deal that has been spent in terms of time parsing these words, strangers and exiles. Some of your translations render it as aliens and foreigners. One of my favorite renderings of this is as resident aliens. And there are some particular nuances that you could recognize between the two words, but I really think that Peter is presenting these as a pair, that he's trying to convey an important thought. And the thought very simply is this: you are here, so you are living here, you are a resident here, but you don't belong here. You are here, but this is not your home. You are living here, but you're not ultimately a citizen here. And you say, well, Michael, I'm an American citizen. I can vote. I understand that. His point, though, is that as a follower of Christ, yes, you are here, and you're experiencing all the rights and privileges that come with living here, but you're here just a blip on the radar screen. And you've got a home in heaven where your citizenship is with the Lord in heaven, and that's where you're headed. That's home. That's where you're going. And so he's saying, I want you to be thinking. I want you to be operating as a person living here. Remember, you're doing so as someone that doesn't belong here. This isn't all that there is. And what exactly does that mean? Well, on the one side, it could mean that you live with just careless, hapless indifference. Well, who cares? Let the whole world, they can all go, just let it go to hell in a handbag. It doesn't make any difference. Is that the encouragement? No, it's not that at all. So what exactly is it that he is encouraging us to do, operating as a resident alien, someone who is here, who doesn't belong here? Pay attention to what he says. He says, I want you as strangers and exiles to do something. And he says to abstain from sinful desires that war against the soul. So he's saying what it looks like to be here, knowing you don't belong here. First of all, he says it means that you operate plainly by making some different choices. People who are following Jesus know, I'm here, I don't belong here, and because of that, I'm making different choices than those who do belong here. Well, what does that mean? Well, when he talks about abstaining from sinful choices, you're aware that every single one of us comes into this world and we are wired to want to do some stuff that God has wired us in such a way where we shouldn't desire to do them. Where we should want to tell the truth, but we don't want to tell the truth. Where we may be wired to experience sexual desire, but we are inclined to have desires that may lead us to express that in out-of-bounds ways. People that are here, but not from here, make different decisions. Yes, we may have those desires, but he says we abstain. If you abstain, you're intentionally doing something. You're not accidentally doing something. It's almost as if the waiter or waitress comes up to your table and says, "Would you like some more French fries?" No. The offer is presented and you say no. Those that are following Jesus make intentionally different desires than those who are just here, operating as though this is all that there is. Why? Because you realize, he says, this war is against the soul. You're aware that these decisions that you could make, they have real and devastating and damaging consequences, so you make different choices. And not only do you make different choices, but he says that you do what? He says, in verse 12, conduct yourselves honorably among the Gentiles so that when they slander you as evildoers. It's interesting, he says, when they slander you. He's not saying if they say something bad about you. He's not saying if by chance something possibly occurs. He says when. If you are living here as a follower of Jesus and you take that seriously, you are going to make different choices, and those choices are going to direct the ire, and they are going to direct the fire of people around you. And they're going to say things about you and to you that are less than flattering, and you will be castigated, and you will be made fun of. And it may be that you're passed over for promotion. It may be that you're passed over for homecoming. It may be that you are rejected from this, that, or the other. Peter doesn't say if it happens. He says when it happens. So he's communicating this thought. Living here knowing you don't belong here means that you anticipate not fitting in. You just anticipate, I'm not going to fit in. What does that look like? Well, this past week, we were at the beach, and man, my hand is so tired. I have signed autographs on the beach all week long, and I'm going to go with a stamp next year. But all the flash photography, I finally had to say no more flash photography. But anyway, so we've been at the beach, and because we have 6 kids, several years ago we bought a big van. It's a 15-passenger van. We took the 2 seats out, so it holds 13. But the nice thing about that is we don't thankfully fill up 13 seats, but it still gives us enough seats. There's 8 of us that we can get in there and our stuff. And so that's really nice, unless you go somewhere, because that van doesn't fit everywhere. And so at this hotel, it's nice. We can get us and our stuff there, but you can't fit in the parking deck. And so you have to go to the oversized lot. And so we have to look. If you could find one, you can find a spot there. Beyond that, if you go out to eat, I don't know how much you thought about this. Most of you, if you go out to eat, there's 2 of you, there's 4 of you, there could be 6 of you. Every time we go out to eat, there's 8 of us. And so we have just grown accustomed to the fact that, well, sometimes we'll just say, give us 2 tables for 4. Or put all the kids at one table. Can you put the 6 way over there? Because we realize, go next time you're at a fast food restaurant, pay attention to how many tables there are that seat 8. Oftentimes, there's not a single table that holds all of that. We just know that. When we were leaving the hotel the other day, we get all of our stuff together, and we're standing out in the hall, and we're waiting on the elevator, and without any question, we just said, we're going to be taking 2 elevators. And we just knew that because there's us and our stuff, we don't all fit. And so we take 2 elevators. We just understand as a family, Caroline and I, we've made different decisions. And we have a large family. And because we have a large family, we don't fit everywhere. As a follower of Jesus, you have made a different decision. And you need to understand you just don't fit in. And that's okay. Don't be surprised by it. Also, keep in mind this, that over time, and this has always been the case, the more that the church has fit in, the less effect it has had. You see it denominationally. The UMC just finally drank the Kool-Aid the other week. They made the decision years ago, but they formalized it the other week. PCUSA did it decades ago. But the Episcopal Church decades ago. But they decided we want to be increasingly like culture. We want to make the same decisions that culture does. We want to fit in, and that'll help us grow. And what happens? It kills them. Why? Because the more that you're like everybody else, the less effect that you have. You don't belong here if you follow Jesus. Understand that. Live here knowing you don't belong. And that's going to prompt you to make some different choices. It's going to remind you, hey, I'm not going to fit in, and that's okay. That's okay. It should be that way. It should be that way. But there's another thing that we need to do based on what Peter says, and that's this. Live here aiming to take others with you. Live here aiming to take others with you. Peter is dealing with people who are taking hostile fire. There is real and meaningful opposition that they are experiencing. They are seeking to follow Jesus, and they are getting real and powerful pushback from the highest echelons of government. But let me say to those of us in a 21st century American audience, the pushback that we have experienced as followers of Jesus has been fairly nominal. As time passes, it is going to get greater. Let me just go ahead and tell you, on June the 2nd, the second day of Pride Month, if you do not embrace everything related to LGBTQ this month, you are going to be castigated. You are going to be lauded as a homophobe, a transphobe, a bigot, and a Nazi. Don't be surprised. That's what they're going to do. And in time, it's going to continue to get worse. The temperature is rising. Don't be surprised by it. And so Peter is making it plain to people in the first century, as it is the case in the 21st century, that we should not be surprised by this. So what should we do? Do we suit up and arm up and just say, all right, let's get ready for a fight. Come on, I will take you and your fat mama. Come on, let's go. I don't really know where that came from. I didn't write it. I mean, do we go? Are we to be culture warriors that constantly engage in tirades on social media, launching increasing numbers of boycotts, protesting with even louder and greater megaphones and larger signs? Is that what we're supposed to be doing? And plenty are. On the flip side, is it that we should be silent, that we should say nothing? Because in truth, people on both sides are saying, well, no, you got to do this, and you got to come out guns a-slinging because they are. And others are saying, no, you got to take it on the cheek. Because on one side, you've got the argument, well, if we don't say anything, how are they ever going to hear the truth? And then you got on the other side, the realization, Jesus came to seek and to save that which was lost. He didn't come as a culture warrior. He never came to transform culture. He never came to save a nation. He always came to save people. So what are we supposed to do? How do we navigate this? In fact, I think this passage even explains it to us. Because he says, I want you to conduct yourselves this way. He says, conduct yourselves honorably among the Gentiles. And when he says Gentiles here, this is not a racial statement of Jews versus Gentiles. He's speaking generally with respect to the spiritual condition of people. And he says Gentiles, talking about those that are outside of connection with God. So he says, I want you as the people that are following Jesus to operate among those who are not following Jesus honorably. so that when they slander you, because it's going to come, they're going to say some nasty things about you. They're going to say some hateful things about you. And they're going to say some unjust things about you. And they're going to say some untrue things about you. And they're going to level their forces against you. And they're going to put you in their crosshairs. That's going to happen. When they do that, he says, I still want you to conduct yourselves honorably. And I want them to, as they are looking at you through their scopes, to still see your good works. Your good works. Well, what kind of good works? Well, for one thing, it's those different decisions and choices that we were talking about. Like that we are people that we're faithful to our spouses. That we're faithful to our word, that we are kind to others, that we help others, that we are good moms and dads, that we are dependable employees. But beyond that, that we are people that say, this is what this Bible says, this is what this Bible says that I should do, and this is what I do. That me and my life, we line up with this. That's honor. As they are slandering you, but they're looking at you through their scope, they see your good works. And then he talks about them glorifying on God on the day he visits us. When he says and talks about God and the day he visits us, what is that? Let me tell you about the entire book of Revelation very quickly. You ready? Jesus is coming back. Everything that sin made wrong, he's going to make right. In Genesis 1, God created paradise, and it was lost. And in the end, paradise is restored. And God is going to hold everyone to account. There you go. Because of that last statement, because of the fact that God is going to hold all to account and that we will all stand before him, for some, they're going to stand before the Lord. And those that are the followers of Jesus, we're going to stand before the Lord and we're going to hear some really good things. Chief among them is this: well done, good and faithful servant. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. And we are going to be probably a sobbing mess. I don't know. I'll probably be singing a bluegrass song, but it'll be, thank you, Lord, for saving my soul. Thank you, Lord, for making me whole. Thank you, Lord, for giving to me thy great salvation, so rich, full, and free. I don't know. I can't imagine what I'm going to say. Maybe you can't either. But I'll be praising God that day. If you're one who knows him, you'll be praising God that day. But there will be plenty of others on that day who will not hear well done, but they will hear this: depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I never knew you. And they won't be praising. Peter says this: I want you to conduct yourself here in such a way that those who are poor-mouthing you, who are targeting you, who are slandering you, who are looking at you through their scope, they're getting ready to squeeze the trigger. They're seeing what you are doing. They're seeing the alignment of your life with what you profess. They are seeing your good deeds, that it has the impact, that it causes them, that the testimony of your life speaks to them in such a way that God gets their attention and he saves them. So that on the day he visits us, they are part of the group that is glorifying him. In short, live here aiming to take others with you. Can we be honest in saying too many times we don't operate that way? Too many times it looks like this. When I was a teenager, I had a Sunday school teacher. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. But he would task me or invite me sometimes. And it was gracious on his part to let me make some extra money by doing some yard work for him. And none of the stuff that he'd give me to do was fun. I kind of hated all the stuff that he would give me to do. It was digging ditches and scrubbing patio furniture or whatever. But like it was some extra money. And this particular day, one of the things that he wanted me to do was a list of things, and he wanted me to spray Roundup on his natural areas. But he's getting ready to go to work, and so he's showing me all the things that he wants me to do. I need to dig this ditch, I need to scrub this patio furniture, I need to do some of this other stuff. And the last thing that I'm going to do is to spray, and most of his front yard is natural area, and so it's going to be gallons and gallons and gallons and gallons of Roundup that I'm going to be spraying. But before, he doesn't just say spray everything. He says, he goes around with me, he says, you say, I want anything that looks like this, I want you to spray this, and anything that looks like that, don't spray that. So leave those alone. Spray this, not this, spray this, not this, spray this, not this. Okay, all right, I got you, Mr. Collins. So I go dig the ditch, I do whatever I'm supposed to do, I clean the patio furniture, I scrub that, I start mixing Roundup, and I start going. And I'm spraying, and it's been a few hours since he walked me through the yard. Is that poison oak or water oak? Is that sumac or azalea? You seen like Vietnam and World War II footage with the flamethrower? That was me. I was just mowing everything down. I was mowing everything down. I got all those natural areas sprayed. I did. And by the end of it, if it was green, I sprayed it. I mowed it all down. But you know what? He never asked me to do anything again. Can we just be honest and say that too many times, as those that are the followers of Jesus, we've been like the flamethrowers? With respect to the world around us, with respect to the people around us, with respect to the culture in which we find ourselves in, instead of winning them, it seems like we'd rather win against them. You realize there's a big difference between the two? What God has called us to as those that are his followers is to think differently. As kingdom-minded citizens, that we are living here, yes, but we're following him. And so my aim should be to live here intending that I don't leave alone, that I'm going to take others with me, and that by the conduct of my life, even in a heated political season, even as I'm trying to navigate all this stuff, that I'm operating in such a way that I want people to see how I operate, how I live, and the testimony of my consistency in such a way that it points them to the knowledge of Jesus and how he can change their life too. That's a different life, but it's the one that we're called to. Will you bow your heads with me?